All right, there's a lot of faith being put in one position, and there is one position that is in big question with the Chargers, and we're going to talk about that in today's video. And one of the things that I want to talk about here is not only who's going to be gone, but the two people, yes, I said two people, that are going to replace him. There is a reason the Chargers didn't go out and go nuts in the center market this year. There's a reason they didn't draft one of the many center options available in the draft. You had some of the best players available when the Chargers were picking at that center position. I think about people like Austin Powers Jackson, which would lock down your center position for the next 10 to 15 years. I am honestly talking about those kind of people, but they didn't. And there's a reason they didn't. So first, what I want to do is I want to acknowledge who left. And who left was offensive lineman Corey Linsley. He is indeed retiring with all the medical issues that he's had going on. And now he had already, before retiring, been officially released by the Chargers. So he has officially been released by the Chargers, and that's okay. But who is behind him? All right, and that is Bradley Boseman. So who is Bradley Boseman? All right, we know he's got big shoes to fill, filling in for Corey Linsley, and we'll talk about who Linsley was for sure. But the big shoes that he has to fill, he is a guy that is absolutely familiar with Greg Roman and this offensive scheme. Now, I think sometimes we think he's a little too familiar with Greg Roman and this offensive scheme. It's not like he's been with Greg Roman for years and years. I mean, he had, but not necessarily at the center position. So let's look a little bit at who Bradley Boseman is. He was a guy that was drafted in 2018. He's out of Alabama, and he was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in the 6th round. It was a late pick, 215 overall. If you're wondering why an Alabama offensive lineman that clearly had some success fell all the way to the 6th round, look no further than his relative athletic score. You know I love this. This does not mean how good a player is going to be. Okay? It just merely shows the physical traits and whether or not they look good for the position he is at. He tested as a center, and he was one of the worst centers to ever test, ranking at 1.19. Now, some people have to do this. Quite frankly, I give him credit. I give him credit for doing this. I give him credit knowing that he wasn't going to run that well. I'm going to go out. I'm going to give it a shot. Dude is just trying to get drafted. It was not great. So here's his history as a player. We know him as Bradley Boseman, the center. He has played the center position for the last 3 seasons. 2 of those seasons for the Carolina Panthers, 1 of those seasons for the Baltimore Ravens, and he is got to be the glue that holds the interior of this offensive line together. If you have 2 good tackles and a great center, you have a good offensive line. All right, the guards, they're starting to get paid now, but you can hide a guard a little bit. You absolutely can hide a guard a little bit if he's between an elite center and tackle. Bradley Boseman is not an elite center. I don't want to have anybody hear me say that. So he's played center the last 3 years. The 3 years before that, he was a guard. All right, so while playing guard for the Baltimore Ravens in 2018, 19, and 20, he never had a PFF score of over 64. Here's one thing that I do enjoy about him. He is a run block first type of guy. He's a run block first type of guy. His best season as a pro football player, his best season came in 2021, with Greg Roman, yes, as his offensive coordinator, just like the previous years in Baltimore, but he was moved to center. In that very best season, he had an offensive rating of 73.6 via PFF. Okay, so why do I use PFF and when do I use it? I like using PFF more for offensive linemen. I like using PFF more on the offensive side of the ball. It's offensive linemen. And then I like it on the defensive side of the ball for a lot of positions because oftentimes it's hard to watch. Don't lie to me. None of you were sitting there watching Baltimore Ravens games last year being like, all right, what's Bradley Boseman? I'm sorry, Carolina Panthers games last year being like, all right, what does Bradley Boseman got? Is he good? Like, I'm going to watch Bradley Boseman on this play. No, you don't do that. You might be doing that every once in a while with Joe Alt this year, right? I get that to an extent. But PFF has people that are specifically watching that one player. They try and determine based on the film what their responsibility was for that play, and then they give them a grade at how well they executed that responsibility. And then what that turns out to be is a score, all right, out of 100. All right, so him being in there is not, that's not that terrible. Okay, it's just not, it's not terrible at all. So we look at those kind of things, and I'm like, all right, Bradley Boseman has some skills. Okay, but what about behind him? Because what if it flat out doesn't work? Outside of that 1 year, he's been in the 60s for PFF his entire career. For an example of what he's replacing, the lowest score, all right, that Corey Linsley has ever had on PFF is a 69. Over the 3 years, I'm not counting last year because clearly this medical issue is already affecting him. Over the last 3 years, 2 with the Chargers, 1 with the Packers, his grade was an 89.9, an 85.7, and a 74.2. Okay, so he was playing at a much, that is what an elite center looks like. That's the kind of grades that you get out of an elite center, and that's why he was paid a large amount of money. So here's the guy that I have tabbed that can replace him at center, and I think it's a very unique comparison, or at least unique that he would be going to center, and it is none other than Brendan James. All right, so there's already reports that he's running with the twos at the center. He's trying to show that. Jim Harbaugh's not a guy that messes around. If Boseman's not getting the job done, somebody else will do it. So why do I think he can be so good at the center position? All right, the 2 areas that hurt him in his relative athletic score coming out of Nebraska were both his height and weight. But if you plug those in to a center position, this guy ends up being one of the most athletic centers ever to test. That's just what he ends up being because the size doesn't hurt him as much, and the height definitely doesn't hurt him at all. All right, the height is exactly what you'd want it to be. The arm length doesn't hurt him as much. You want longer arms on tackles. But this agility grade, the idea of the 3-cone, especially the shuttle. All right, elite, that is good working in small spaces. It means he has quick feet. He has a good bench press. All right, he just showed that he has the ability to be an athlete. And when you put him in a Greg Roman offense, when you put a good athlete in there, then all of a sudden some good things can happen. Also, I wouldn't sleep on a guy like Carson Barnhart. I think he will play guard, all right, for you if he makes this team. I always say don't sleep on him. Also, one other option for you. I've already said this in another video. There is another former Michigan Wolverine. He was with the Steelers. Mason Cole is somebody that you could bring in if you feel like you don't have enough depth, and he is a free agent right now. So those are some of the things, but the Chargers are putting a lot of faith in Bradley Boseman because there's not a ton behind him, or are they putting a lot of faith in James, who was drafted 3 years ago, and maybe now he can start showing a little bit of that talent if he can be in the right system. He did play 241 snaps at center last year. His run blocking grade was absolutely atrocious. I mean, really bad. But he had a good pass blocking grade. What can you do for him? You never know. All right, thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. Chargers content every day. We want to be your go-to source. Thanks for watching. See ya.